Hello and welcome to Mysteries of Science. My name's Stevie, I'm the Deputy Editor of Science and Nature, the monthly magazine from the team behind The Week Junior.
And I'm Michael, the Junior Editor. On this podcast, we take a look at our favourite mysteries of science. These are the strange phenomena and bizarre events that have left scientists scratching their heads and, despite their best efforts, remain well and truly unsolved. So Stevie, tell us, what are we looking at today?
Well, Michael, what's got lots of tentacles and, according to legend, snacks on gigantic sailing ships? Nope, it's not a trick question, and it's no joke either. The answer is one of the most mythical sea creatures of all, an animal so enormous that it's rumoured to have sunk ocean vessels and terrorised sailors for centuries. It's known as the Kraken.
Now, I've heard the stories, and it does sound terrifying, but just where and when did these legends start?
Why has the myth endured for so long?
And could the Kraken actually exist?
I think it's time we hopped onto a ship with some experts and went on a journey into the deep, dark depths of the ocean to try and catch a monster. This is Mysteries of Science.
So, Stevie, we know the Kraken is this large sea monster, but when did the story start?
So, tales of sea monsters have existed in folklore for centuries. The first modern description of the Kraken appeared in a travel diary by adventurer Francesco Negri in late 1600s, who used the words krake to describe a creature with arms and legs that looked like an uprooted tree. A couple of centuries later, the famous poet Alfred Tennyson wrote a sonnet, which is a little bit like a love poem, called The Kraken. In it, he describes a monster with giant arms that lives in the abysmal sea, sending sailors to early graves by destroying their ships.
So, tales of the Kraken go back a long way then?
Yes, but they're not entirely a thing of the past.
So yeah, it was, I would basically sit home, I would get a fantasy book, I would read it in one day, and then I would, ask where the next one is. I thought it was this idea of the world being more than what we know of it was just always fascinating for me. And still is, which is kind of why I became a creative writer. I love the idea of looking into the potentials and asking the what ifs and understanding that, there are mysteries in this world to be understood and to be explored, and some mysteries to not be understood and to be explored.
This is Megan Atwood, an author whose latest book, Revenge of the Kraken, explores the myths surrounding this legendary sea monster.
The Kraken was particularly interesting to me because I loved this idea of the unknown, and the ocean is so vast and so fascinating and so scary all at the same time. And of course, there's got to be a gigantic monster under the sea. There has to be, right? So I love this idea of thinking about the Kraken as this sort of warrior, this thing that was going to let people know if they weren't treating the ocean or the earth very well, it would take its revenge.
Before writing the book, Megan did lots of research into where the Kraken myth came from.
I did quite a bit of research just to figure out, where has this come from? What culture is this specifically connected to? What I found is it's connected to Scandinavian culture, and some reports say that around the 12th century it was first mentioned along with a couple of other sea monsters. There's a really cool one that is a whale that pretends to be an island and that will submerge and take sailors with them. There were a lot of, especially in Scandinavia, a lot of these myths about sailors being sort of taken under. And even in other different cultures, there were many tentacled creatures that came after sailors as well, which I thought was kind of fascinating.
But the Kraken is not just something from old stories and myth. Megan also came across some more modern depictions of the Kraken, including in blockbuster movies.
I don't know if you know, but in a couple of the movies, I think it's, what is it? Something with the Titans. Clash of the Titans. Sorry. In Clash of the Titans, yes. They say, release the Kraken.
Yes, I remember that movie. Release the Kraken!
I wouldn't quit the day job to become an actor just yet, Michael.
No, I'm no Liam Neeson.
So from the 12th century Scandinavia to the 21st century Hollywood, the Kraken is a story that's been kept alive for hundreds of years.
Imagine if we could speak to someone who worked on that movie to find out how they brought the Kraken to life.
Hi, I'm Rob PK. I'm a visual effects software developer. I'm currently working for a company called Side Effects, and prior to that was at a visual effects studio called MPC, where I worked on Clash of the Titans.
Rob works in visual effects, and he was part of the team tasked with taking the myth of the Kraken and turning it into a real-life creature of sorts for people to enjoy on a movie screen. So Rob, what were the challenges of creating the Kraken?
There is no Kraken you can go to the zoo and just film. This was always going to be an enormous undertaking from a visual effects perspective. The Kraken is not a human-sized character. This thing is enormous, far bigger than a dinosaur. And it needed to interact with human-scale actors, counterparts. And this thing rises out of the water, so suddenly you have this creature that comes out of the water and you have water dripping off of it from hundreds of meters above the ground, and you still want to see all of that fine droplet level detail. So trying to come up with technology that can handle kind of millimeter sized detail hundreds of meters above the ground is quite a challenge. So I think that's at least a taster of the things that we were involved in.
So where did Rob and his colleagues take inspiration from? How did they know what the Kraken was going to look like?
Yeah, the Kraken, like most other effects that MPC took on, are based heavily on effectively concept art. And that concept art may be entirely something that emerges from the head of a creative director or his art team, or be grounded somewhat in reality. We take a lot of inspiration from, even for creatures that don't exist in the real world, looking for creatures that are comparable or share some characteristics.
Real-world creatures that are comparable or share some characteristics. That's how we're going to find the Kraken. But what real-world creatures could possibly share any characteristics with this monstrous myth?
I think it's time we brought in our next expert.
This is H.P. Newquist. I'm a writer. I've written nearly 30 books, mostly about strange and weird science and history. One of my most popular books is called Here There Be Monsters. It's about the mythology of the Kraken, the monstrous sea creature that very well may have been today's giant squid.
This is H.P. Newquist. Now, he decided to write a book about the Kraken when he realized just how little we know about the ocean.
I was looking for things that would be really unusual for the next book in the series. And one of the things that's least explored on Earth is the ocean. We know more about the mysteries of space than we really do about our own ocean.
But what actual creature could possibly look like the Kraken?
Well, Stevie, it's time that we met the giant squid.
The giant squid is a monstrous beast. It's 30 feet long. It's one of the largest creatures on Earth. And because it lives so deep in the ocean, there really hadn't been actual scientific investigation, any research about it, literally all of history until about a decade ago. The stories about the washed up giant squids so closely resembled the Kraken, which were these sea creatures with many, many arms and very large and extremely strange looking, finally gave science the evidence they needed to show that here was actually the basis, the root of the mythological Kraken.
So how many giant squid are there?
Science has only seen 12 living giant squid. 12. And there must be hundreds of thousands of them because they're being used for food by one of the largest whale populations on Earth. But to date, we have only seen 12 live ones, which makes them an incredibly mysterious creature to try and study because we simply can't get down deep enough to find them. And yet there have to be tens, if not hundreds of thousands of them down in the very depths of the ocean.
12 live ones. So if scientists have only seen so few, how can they tell the giant squid is the Kraken?
I think we need to speak to someone who's not only seen a giant squid, but actually looks after one.
Hi, I'm John Ablett. I'm Senior Curator of Mollusks at the Natural History Museum in London. And my job is basically looking after the 8 million mollusk specimens that we have stored here behind the scenes and using them and helping scientists around the world to learn more about the natural world.
This is John Abbott. He joined the Natural History Museum in 2003 and 1 year later found himself in charge of a giant squid specimen.
And what happened is some fishermen who were working off the coast of the Falkland Islands literally pulled up their nets. They were looking for hoki and hake, two sort of commercially available fish. And when they pulled their nets up, they found a giant squid in the nets. The fishermen offered it to the fisheries department on the Falkland Islands, who got in touch with the Natural History Museum here and said, we think it would be really great if the squid could come to you for study and to be put on display.
Wow, imagine being told that someone's just found a giant squid that they want you to study.
And not just any giant squid, Stevie. This is one of the largest, most complete specimens ever found.
But what do you do with it when it arrives? How do you preserve a giant squid?
So being, fairly new to the museum, I kind of wrote to the people that do my kind of job all around the world. There are a few of us. And I said, look, I've just got a giant squid. What would you do? And in the end, actually, we decided to do what we would do with any specimen that comes in the museum. First of all, it arrived frozen, and we were able to chip off a few bits of tissue for DNA analysis. So if you want really good tissue for looking at the DNA, you want to get to it before it's really had too much done to it, before it's defrosted, before there's any other chemicals introduced. So we managed to chip off a little bit of tissue, and we froze them at -80. And they're available for people who wish to study the DNA of the giant squid. Then we defrosted it, which took about 4 days and was pretty smelly, I must tell you. But after about 4 days, then we injected it with a chemical called formylsaline, which is formaldehyde gas dissolved in seawater. And this is kind of what embalmers used to use for preserving dead bodies, and it's what we use in museums for what we call fixing specimens, so stopping rotting straight away and preserving the tissues. And once we'd done that, injected the whole body with it, we actually sat it in a huge container full of this chemical, because you really want to make sure the chemicals had time to penetrate every single bit of tissue to stop it rotting in the future.
Well, I'm certainly glad I wasn't there to smell it after it defrosted. But after all of that, how do you then put it on display?
Well, I was tasked with finding a tank to house it in, because we wanted people to be able to see it. We didn't want to be in sort of one of the stainless steel type tanks that many of our large specimens in. I couldn't really find anyone that was able to build one. And in the end, we ended up contacting Damien Hirst, the artist's people, and said, who makes your amazing huge tanks for when Damien Hirst puts his artwork on display? And they put us in touch with the company. And so we actually ended up using the same company as Damien Hirst's amazing artworks.
So giant squids must be pretty big if they had to get a whole new tank made especially.
I guess the clue is in the name after all.
But just how giant are giant squids?
So there's a little bit of controversy how big they get, and they certainly don't get to, these pulling down ships size. But a generally accepted rule is sort of 12 to 13 metres for females and about 10 for males. Our specimen, well, one of our specimens, we have several, but Archie, our largest specimen, is 8.62 metres and female, so not quite fully grown.
I love it, Archie. So how can we see Archie for ourselves?
There's a behind-the-scenes tour called the Spirit Collection Tour, and people can book a ticket, and you get to see not only the giant squid, but some of the amazing spirit alcohol-preserved specimens, and learn about the work that we do here at the museum. So if you check out the Natural History Museum's website, and you'll be able to find details about that.
So what do you think, John? Is the giant squid the real-life Kraken?
I think there's a good chance. I mean, if you look at lots of the world's myths and mythologies, different countries around the world have these huge squid octopus-like beasts. You have the Skylo in Greek mythology, there's the Lusca in Caribbean mythology, and lots of Chinese and Japanese sort of large squiddy octopusy type legends. And when you look at the Kraken mythologies, all these animals, they have these long arms and tentacles. They often have beaks, large eyes, and these are all things that the giant squid had. And because giant squid live in such deep depths, the only time that humans really come across them is when they wash up on the shore, when they're dead, or when they're found at the surface. And it's thought that giant squid can't survive at surface temperatures. So if they're there, they'd be, if not dead, they would be dying, not in a good condition. And you can imagine if you saw, this huge beast flailing at the surface, or these partially digested or rotting remains of some kind of enormous beast, I'm sure your mind would turn to some kind of monster of the deep. So yeah, I'm pretty sure that, the giant squid is the best candidate for the real Kraken.
That's fascinating. So the giant squid could be the Kraken. But are there any other candidates?
There is a species of squid that gets even bigger than the giant squid. It's called the colossal squid. And the colossal squid, they've never found a fully grown specimen. There's been a few kind of sub-adult specimens found. I believe there was a specimen found by some Japanese scientists in around 2006, and that was just over 9 meters long, I think. And that was not a fully grown colossal squid. And there's a little bit of argument about how big they get, but it's been theorized that they could reach up to 18 meters. However, this species only lives in Antarctic waters, so very far away from the northern Europe where the Kraken myth was spawned. So it's very unlikely that this species is responsible for the Kraken myth.
I love that. How do you get bigger than a giant squid? The colossal squid. So just how sure are you, John? I think it's time we cracked out our old friend, the mysteryometer. So tell us, on a scale of 1 to 100, how close are we to solving the mystery of the Kraken?
Somewhere in between. I'd go for 70 or even 80%. I'm fairly certain. But, the great thing about deep sea is you never know what's down there, and you never know, what's still to be discovered. And possibly that undiscovered creature is the thing that could actually be the origin of the Kraken myth. But I'm fairly certain the giant squid is responsible.
So John's pretty confident then. Is that case closed?
Not so far, Stevie. HP Newquist is less sure.
If 1 is that we know nothing and 100 is we know everything, I would say we're at about 7 or 8. Everything that we do know about them is from the carcasses of dead giant and colossal squid that have washed up on shore. We've never been able to capture a live one because we've only seen a dozen of them. And we know about them only through examining their carcasses. And that tells us nothing at all about how they go through their days, how they hunt their food, how they reproduce, how they avoid predators like whales. So the things we do know about them are purely biological, or actually, let's say anatomical. We know about their structure, but we literally know nothing about the way they live.
So, as long as the ocean remains a mystery, then the myth of the Kraken will endure.
Well, Megan Atwood certainly seems to think so, and she believes that the Kraken actually tells us something fundamental about human nature.
I think the Kraken endures because, first of all, we don't understand. We haven't mapped the entire ocean as far as I know. So we don't understand exactly what's in there, which is perfect for our human imaginations to imagine what could be there. And also the Kraken, I believe, is a fantastic metaphor, whether we mean it to be or not, about not of turning things into a monster when it's really we just don't understand them in some way.
So while we're pretty sure the Kraken might actually be the giant squid, as long as the ocean remains a mystery, the myth will go on as generation after generation tells their own terrifying tales about massive monsters lurking in the deep sea.
We'd love to hear your thoughts about the giant squid and the Kraken. Have you ever seen something strange swimming in the sea? Maybe you'd like to send a drawing in of what you think the Kraken looks like. Email hello@science-nature.co.uk to share your thoughts with us, either with an audio or a video recording.
And of course, don't forget to pick up the latest copy of the Week Junior's Science and Nature for even more mysteries.
We'll be back in 2 weeks' time for our next episode, which is all about childhood memories.
So, what's your earliest memory, Stevie?
You know what? I'm not actually sure. What about you?
I'm not sure either.
Well, we've got 2 weeks to try and remember.
How about you? What's your earliest memory? Email hello@science-nature.co.uk with either a written message or a video recording telling us your very earliest memory, and you could feature on our next show. Until then, stay curious.
Thanks for listening to The Week Junior Show, which is made by the same people that make The Week Junior magazine. You can get a free trial of The Week Junior by heading to theweekjunior.co.uk/podcast and using the code podcast at checkout.